To the embryonical great soul, the soul now here and evolving, conscious word, Godward, obstacles, even those which are often difficult and disheartening, most dense, gross, and of the highest material form, cannot act as a retarding force, which should be an incentive to greater effort and a glorification in overcoming, thereby proving self-mastery and progress toward the ultimate goal of soul consciousness and harmonization with the great cosmic soul. The mind is, or must become conscious, of being the builder of the soul, just as the architect is the designer and director when building a palace or temple. This being true, it is most regrettable that the educated, highly intellectual mind does not always function as the builder of a soul or bring the associated soul to consciousness. For this reason, we are frequently conscious that great, brilliant minds which we contact are incapable of comprehending the possibility of attaining soul consciousness or immortality. If the acquirement of truth and spiritual understanding depended entirely on the mind, and if the mind recognized the inner urge or incentive from the divine spark buried in the debris of the personality, then the world would long since have come into the age of light, which as it indicated by the great book of Revelation. Masterminds who have lived and labored for mental, physical, material improvement have seldom given any thought to the things which are lasting and beyond price, the things belonging to and of the soul. Inner wisdom must come from the soul. This wisdom, once attained, is capable of illuminating the intellect and be its directing force. The mind is the builder of the soul, but before it can become a builder, it must have become conscious of its ability to build the soul. It must desire greater life than that offered by ordinary life and physical science. There must also be an urge from the soul itself and a desire to be brought to life in consciousness. The mind must be awakened to its spiritual opportunities and possibilities in much the same manner as it becomes conscious of the many physical desires of which man is possessed and which govern in ordinary life. It is written that John the Baptist said, quote, I am come baptizing with water, but one mightier than I cometh, the latches of whose shoes I am not worthy to unloose. He shall baptize you with the Holy Ghost and with fire. End quote. Water is the symbol of mind. As such, it represents all those thoughts and desires which are part of the mental, physical, moral man. Active water is active intellectual mentality. All the things that man thinks, desires, and acts upon in ordinary life are the result of this water baptism or mental intellect mentality. But there must come a time when man is no longer satisfied with the mere things of life, desirable as they may be. Then comes the urge to seek for these things which the inner feeling indicates as possible to obtain, and when finally the mind is turned to thoughts of, and desire for, spiritual varieties and soul possibilities, then man experiences the beginning of the baptism by fire, and ultimately the baptism of or by the Holy Ghost. This last meaning that the soul has received the heavenly light, that light which is neither on land nor sea. So it is that when the mind, the John the Baptist, has been finally successful in awakening the divine spark, the soul within, to a realization of his existence, and when the inner being accepts the truths and lives accordingly, then will come an influx of the Holy Ghost, the cosmic light. The conscious individuality is ultimately brought about. This is man's highest estate, and once attained, it can truly be said that, quote, and man has become as one of the gods, end quote. The enlightened and desire-awakened mind has become the great spiritualized soul builder. All necessary knowledge, all the essential mental requirements are at the command of the awakened soul. The soul, which has, by its own desires and efforts, evolved toward conscious individuality, that state which is the beginning of its immortalization. Napoleon, like many others of his type since, possessed one of the most remarkable minds of his kind. He was chosen to free mankind from the bondage of virtual slavery. For a time, he was true to his great mission. Then personal ambition took the place of love for his fellow man. He became ambitious and selfish. As a result of this selfishness, he, like Hitler and his kind of modern times, built an egotistical shadow of the real soul and the spiritual self, debased and abused. This left him to his doom, and the shadowy self was the means of his destruction in the very hour of his triumph. The soul is built in harmony with the desires of the mind and the urge of the soul, still in bondage. If the thoughts and desires become purified, enlightened, exalted, and come under the domain of wisdom, then the soul will likewise develop. If, on the contrary, selfishness, self-seeking, and the various other evil emotions govern the thoughts, desires, and life, then will be created a mere shell of a soul, the shadow, unbaptized by the fire of God or the Holy Ghost, and this ultimately brings about its own detention in a mortal body for perhaps many reincarnations, even the possibility of the loss of its personality. This is God's, the Creator's, own law. It is a fixed fiat. It cannot be set aside or repudiated. It is the law of compensation or reaction. The mind of Oscar Wilde was undoubtedly one of the most brilliant of all times, but this was at the expense of his both body and soul. The desires finding no deeper outlet than those possible to the body, the soul was consumed in mental brilliancy on one hand, and degenerative sex practices on the other. Had this great mind felt the baptism of St. John, a mighty being would have been born, and the world would have become conscious of a spiritual giant. Man cannot live but in action, and woe if that action is not turned towards spiritual accomplishment. The first glimpse of truth, the first intuitional conception and inner feeling is the sensing that there exists something greater and above the science, the religion, and the wisdom known to the theologian and material scientist. This is the annunciation from God in the realm of the invisible to our inner individual self, making us aware of the possibility of attaining to God consciousness. It is the conception of the Christos, the Christ of the Gnostics, within us. It is the beginning of real existence. It is the baptism by John the Baptist. It foreshadows greater things to come. When this comprehension first dawns on the pilgrim, he, as did Mary before him, wonders within himself, how can this thing be? Then the guardian angel, the spiritual monitor, answers, the Holy Ghost, thy soul's fire, shall come upon thee, and the power of the high shall overshadow thee. Therefore also that holy thing which shall be born of thee shall be called the Son of God. That is the baptism by the Holy Ghost, the attainment of the soul's illumination. This rebirth must take place in every human being desirous of attaining conscious individuality, the state of immortalization. The Annunciation must reach us direct. Within us must be born the thought of and desire for kinship with the Creator. We must come into the realization that the soul within must become awakened to its heritage and possibilities, must be brought into conscious activity, and that the fire from heaven, the glory which is brought about by personal effort toward illumination, must descend upon us, and as a result of this, bring about the conscious birth of the eternal, living, conscious soul. It is then that we have conceived the Word. The Word has become, is alive within, flesh, is become holy. It is created by the highest born of the Holy Ghost. It is baptized with the fires which descended from heaven, the cosmic soul. The reference of fire throughout the Scriptures have been the cause of much conjecture among the teachers of Christian lore. Its true meaning has seldom dawned upon the comprehension of the majority, and it has been interpreted to signify many different things. Nearly all of these interpretations have been at fault and as a consequence were grossly misleading.